Welcome to No BS Job Search Advice Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, the head coach for JobSearchCoachingHQ.com. And welcome. This is episode 835 of this show, but it's a repeat of an early episode I did on Job Search Radio, interviewing Chip Luman, one of the founders of HireVue. HireVue is a service that corporations use. It's part applicant tracking system, but it's also, and this is a big part of it, part video interviewing. So we talk about how their system works, and I think you can apply it to other situations where you're dealing with both video and ATSs. I hope you find this show helpful and give it a few stars, preferably 5 in whatever podcast service you listen to it on, and that you'll reach out to me on Facebook. Connect with me on Facebook. Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, is my page there. Please give me 5 stars. You'll get a lot more content daily that you can watch, listen to, or read that's going to help you find work more quickly. And this show is going to be about a half hour in length. It's really good. Now, let's get going. I've been in recruiting for more than 40 years now. And I remember the first time I was introduced to the notion of video as part of the job search. It was the 1980s, and someone sent me a VHS tape of them reading their resume in front of a blue screen. Now, this is a senior IT guy, about 70 pounds overweight, and he's reading to me from his resume. Boring, horrible. The one good thing that came out of it was at one point I was investigated by the Internal Revenue Service and was able to demonstrate that that video equipment was used for a good purpose. Now, let's also fast track into the 90s, or late 90s, I'd say, when applicant tracking systems start to show up on the landscape for job hunters. Now, applicant tracking systems initially seemed like a good thing. After all, people were mailing resumes to employers. Their resumes were getting lost, or they were getting faxed to the employer, and the fax machines would run out of paper, or yada, yada, yada. So here we are, fast forwarding further, and no one likes applicant tracking systems. You hate them, I'm sure. I know I hate them. I hate them both as the recipient of resumes through them, and I hate them when my clients kind of block me from communicating with them through the applicant tracking system and turning it into the black hole for both you and I. So what I decided to do is bring on a guest today whose name is Chip Luman. And Chip is the COO and co-founder of HireVue, a firm that's created a solution to solve some of these problems for us. And what's cool is Chip's firm and Chip's product, HireVue, is the HR product of the year for I believe it's the 4th year running at the HR Tech Conference. So Chip, welcome. Thank you for making time to speak with my audience.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me. And we've had a couple of gaps in there, but we have won those awards, off and on. And we've won for our Insights product this year, which is a big data solution that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later.
Terrific. So when job hunters are getting trapped in the applicant tracking system as it exists today, what's going on that's blocking them from actually communicating with employers?
Well, so the applicant tracking system is there's a set of algorithms, and there are criteria that the employers who are setting up can create to really screen through if you have the skills for the job. And there's been a lot of things written out there about you can game the system. There's a whole industry of people, helping people write resumes to get through the applicant tracking system. And so the problem is you get a job description. Somebody understands that that's how the system works. They write their resume to match keywords. They get through. If you don't understand that, you might not get through, even though you might be the best person for the job.
So let's look at HireVue and the kind of solution it and similar products try to offer and help people understand how the applicant tracking system is in the process of changing. with these add-on products?
Yeah, so at the core, there's government requirements, right, to keep track of who's applied, people's racial backgrounds, their gender, et cetera, for EEO reporting. And ATSs do a great job of capturing that data. But as I kind of alluded to, they don't do a really good job of always getting the right people matched up for an interview. And so what the digital interviewing process does is we recognize that people are more than a piece of paper, right? People are stories. People have things to share about their experience that they can convey differently than what might be a bullet point on a resume. And so while we do partner with many ATSs as through their process people come in, we do have ways also for organizations to have people take a video interview even before applying. And what we do is we allow you to tell your story. And it's a structured interview. Everybody gets the same process. And so for candidates, there's a couple really big benefits. And I'm talking about an asynchronous process, which is simple as thinking about your DVR. You want to watch a show, you record it, you go back and watch it at a time that's convenient to you. You can take an interview when it's convenient. And what we find, as you would expect, most of the people that take interviews for the companies that use our product do it outside of work hours when it's convenient to them, so they don't have to make up a story while they're missing work. You know, meet a recruiter's daytime hours. They can do it at night, 10 o'clock after they put the kids to bed and that kind of thing. So it's convenient. And then it's fair because everybody's getting the same set of questions. So you don't have to worry that the person that was on the phone before you got to talking about their favorite football team, and then that's what they and the hiring manager ended up talking about, not the actual job. So that's what we drive, is a more fair and convenient process.
It sounds like what someone's able to do is, number one, schedule an appointment, quote unquote, at a time that's convenient for them rather than when the phone happens to ring. And number two is ensure that there's a standardized interviewing process, which I know to job hunters sounds tedious and boring, but in point of fact, it's far superior than the kind of whims that I know some of my old clients used to do when they were interviewing. Based upon one answer, they start going down a particular rabbit hole to investigate further versus just being able to screen on the facts as presented to them as answers to questions. Very nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what we encourage employers to do is let people do that right when they apply. So, you kind of talked about that scheduling, which you get to schedule, right? You get a link. They ask you to do it within a couple of days. But really the optimal thing is when you're in there actually deciding, hey, I'm interested, well, answer those questions right then and there.
Now, this assumes, of course, that someone is appropriately attired to do an interview. Now, I can't imagine what it's like to have someone in a T-shirt doing interviews, unless you're interviewing with a startup organization for which that's an appropriate attire for the occasion.
Right. Well, that's, go ahead.
No, please, you're my guest, please.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say, we have some blooper reels, and we don't show those publicly, but we encourage people on our website. Our employers encourage them to treat it, like you said, professionally. But you would be surprised with some people who have shown up in interviews, although I've got stories back, I still remember campus interviewing. I had a guy show up in, cut-off jean shorts, a ripped T-shirt, and this was for an engineering job. And we were just kind of shocked that he walked into the campus thing looking like that. So I guess it doesn't matter whether it's in person or video. Some people just don't have good judgment sometimes.
Bingo. So true. And I have to assume, and please correct me about this if I'm mistaken, for those of you who are not, I'm doing this show in the United States, for those of you who might not be U.S. born and thus might be arriving here with an accent that is not typical for the United States, you might be fearful that there's communication issues might come up, that employers might become intolerant of, quote, the accent that you have and adversely evaluate you on that basis. I somehow suspect this kind of cuts through that because they're dealing with standardized questions that allow you to really shine for what you know rather than that social chit-chat stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the scenario you describe is a poorly trained manager, right, who's allowing something else to influence their decision. And the value of this process is because it's recorded and stored, multiple people can evaluate that content. And oftentimes that's what organizations do, is when they find good candidates, they ask other people to come in and review those candidates. Again, getting the value of that time shift, right, when it's convenient. But the scenario you just painted kind of drives out that bias that one person may have. And to the positive side, since we have multinational and folks, companies outside of the U.S. as well, European-based and Asian-based companies, this actually bridges the language gap, because you may be able to do the interview in your native language. Then they've got somebody who can review that in the language if you're not being required to speak Spanish or Chinese or something, right? It actually helps bridge language gap for global hiring, because, again, because it's recorded, you can have somebody else doing that review that may not necessarily need to be multilingual. So it's actually a great benefit for folks outside of the U.S. and thinking in a more global workforce.
Beautiful. And folks, we'll be back with more from Chip Luman in just a moment, but first I want to provide you with my job search insider tip for this show. And this tip is about dealing with an offer that you suspect is not going to exactly be at the right price for you. So my encouragement is, before you just go off the handle, take a deep breath, listen to the proposal, and then start off by asking yourself two questions. The first question is, what do I really need to get from this firm in terms of salary, benefits, any sort of perk that would cause you to say yes? And number two is, I always encourage people, review the original reasons why you decided to look for a position. If you start to see an intersection where this all works, well, you're going to be closer to doing the deal than you might think initially. It also gives you a framework with which you can go back to the employer and speak with them about improving the offer. So you're clear about what you're willing to take and not willing to take, and can make a good decision at the end of the negotiation. So that's my tip for this show. Let's come back to Chip and continue our conversation about video interviewing. So the product is wonderful, quite obviously, in that it really solves a huge headache for employers, and I have to in all candor say for job hunters as well, because you get to show your stuff and not be judged by the piece of paper unnecessarily. So now we come to the part of showing your stuff and what someone can do to prepare for a video interview once it's that time. Now, we obviously can't give them all the questions that employers ask. That would be ridiculous. The list is enormous, I'm sure. But how can someone get themselves ready for a video interview, Chip?
Well, so if you think specifically about video, because as you alluded to, there's a lot of material out there, this show, other things that help you get ready for an interview. And the video interview is not any different other than you're being recorded on camera. You can take video interviews on your Mac, your PC, also mobile. And we've got a site, a place on our website that gives you tips, obviously dress professional, about pacing, about presentation. But the reality is, get on your mobile phone. You can record a video, turn that camera towards yourself, and just practice answering questions. And there are the basic questions you can find out there, right? Tell me about a challenge you had at work and how you overcame it. Just take a question, practice, watch yourself back and forth. You can do that with your own tools. Do that with your webcam on your computer. Our product allows you, once you get into test and make sure everything's working, whether that's mobile or on the computer, camera's working, microphone's the right level, we let you do a practice test question as many times as you want. I encourage everybody to do that. Once you've gotten your environment, professional looking place, do it in your office, do it with a blank wall behind you. If you're in an apartment, right, find a place that doesn't show your bedroom or your dirty laundry in the background. Think about what's behind there, but practice and do that till you get comfortable with the actual process. Because in our process, in what we call the on-demand, employers give you 30 seconds to maybe a minute to prepare once they give a question, or they might ask you to watch something. Then you're going to get 2 or 3 minutes to respond, and you don't get to redo it. It's just like a real interview. It's just like if somebody's asking you those questions, in real time. So that's my best tip is practice. Everybody has access to video. I mean, everybody's putting it on YouTube, putting it up on Instagram, those kind of things. Get comfortable with the process so that when the questions come, you're focusing on the question, not the camera.
So you're saying most answers need to be structured for 2 to 3 minutes in the HireVue process. Did I hear that correct?
Yeah, well, and employers can set those lengths, and that's why you want to practice, because that sounds short, but actually in real life, you and I are going back and forth at probably 15 to 30-second responses. 3 minutes is a long time to talk, and they don't require you to talk that long. But yeah, you usually will be told how long you have to respond. So think, be concise, and answer in that allotted time.
And as much as we want to be concise and, of course, answer within the allotted time, folks don't freak out and say, oh, my God, I got to get this done in 3 minutes and start foaming at the mouth with anxiety so that you're done in 15 seconds.
Right.
And so, the reverse can be a problem, too, where your answer is so short that they start rejecting you pretty early because in your hysteria you hurt yourself. That's
right.
why the practice that Chip is recommending is just so important, so that you can feel a degree of ease with yourself. Again, they're trying to hire a solution to a problem, and you're trying to get yourself in the door to be able to demonstrate it further. So you just want to come across like a pro that sets them at ease and doesn't cause them to hesitate, right?
Absolutely.
So in preparing someone, to get, I'm sorry, once they've done the interview, what does HireVue do with the interview? How does it start to think about the application? What do customers have access to through your system that takes the process further?
Yeah, there are a couple of different ways that the customers use the system. Again, I use that analogy of your DVR at home. So you've recorded 10 shows from your favorite series, and you go in there and you'll see those 10 shows, and you could pick number 4, or you could go back to the beginning and watch it in sequence. Recruiters and hiring managers have the same thing. They get a list of all the candidates that have applied for that job, and then they can watch sequentially all the questions that you've been asked and hear your answers, or they might go to question number 4 and listen to every single candidate's response to question number 4. So they get a lot of flexibility on how they're assessing and listening to the content. And as you alluded to earlier about kind of presenting yourself, this is where we see the power of the product, because you may put on your resume, I delivered a 20% increase in productivity over the last year, and everybody gets what that number means. But now you get the opportunity to explain how. I was able to put this project team together, and we did X, Y, Z, and this is how we did this, and we collaborated, and I won an award for it. Right? That's the way you want to think about your questions, and that's what employers are looking for inside of the product. So this is why it's powerful, because instead of doing one phone screen, maybe 2, 3, 4, you answer once, 3, 4, 5 people get to review your responses. And then that next step is they would engage with a live video interview. So now I've decided you're one of our top candidates. Instead of asking you to take time off of work, maybe drive across town and come see us or fly in, we can do it via video. And again, that's recorded and I can collaborate. So that when they actually do say it's time to come into our office, well, now it's about actually, do we like each other? Is a place I want to work? Back to your tip in the middle there, now we're getting into negotiations, right? That's the power of what's happening on the other side with the content.
Very sweet. Question for you. Does the system analyze responses as well and make recommendations based upon the responses, or is it left to the client purely as a human decision?
Well, that's our new product. That's HireVue Insights, which is a machine learning approach that actually analyzes the responses that our candidates give. And, if you think about it, and there's a whole, industrial and organizational psychology and a lot of science around, as you alluded to, structured interviews, how you rate, et cetera. If you think about what we do, it takes what you say, it then looks at who rates people, and it correlates to who picks the right people that get hired and actually do a good job. to put it into kind of simple terms. And once the system understands how you respond to questions, the kind of things that you do and talk about, the projects and the words you use, and looks at that performance and hiring decision, it does get to a point to say, look, we've interviewed 1,000 people for this job. We know based on what a person says in the interview, their likelihood of being able to join the team and be successful. Very much different than a resume, which is just matching keywords to a job description. This actually starts to get into when I say I did those things and I executed on these things, and I compare to other people who said similar things and got hired and then did well. That's how it works. And there's I got a big data scientist. He confuses me sometimes with the math he's doing and the algorithms. But if you think about the way Amazon, Pandora, a lot of these recommendation engines work, it's a similar kind of concept. And so the power is...
I'm sorry, please.
Well, I would say the power is 10,000 people might apply for a job, and in today's world, they're going to call the first 100 or 200 people. In this scenario, if all 10,000 people take an on-demand interview, number 9,322 is the right person, and the system will say, talk to this person first, instead of dialing through 9,000 people, which no company does, which we all know the black hole, and that's the problem of the ATS and not enough resources. So you could be the last person to apply, but the first person to get spoken to with this system.
And what it's doing, I just want to make sure everyone understands it, is analyzing the responses to questions in the system, making comparisons with previous hires in order to determine likelihood of success. So in this model, if the previous hire was mediocre, it can recognize that and try to improve over the previous selection process, right?
That's what it does. It's machine learning, and it'll be they responded this way. The hiring manager either said yes or no, and in that situation, oftentimes there might have been 3 yeses and 2 nos, right? And so the person moved through. But then it does say, and we'll look at their performance in first 90 days of the year, and it'll learn over time. And then also everybody in the system starts to see, okay, it would say who's a good selector of talent and who's not. So hiring managers who really aren't good, who may let some of those things get in the way, like you talked about earlier, they get taken out of the process for either more training or they might not get the privilege of hiring going forward.
I know I've had so many clients in the past who have interviewers, who have hiring managers who are just awful and arbitrary and unresponsive throughout the process. And I know as a search professional, I've gotten blamed many times why jobs are open for so long. And yeah, I have an example of a search going on right now. I was asked to work on this search in Houston, identified someone within 3 days who was a home run. A week later, I finally got a message from them saying they want to schedule. 2 days later, he walks in the door. It's 2 weeks later. I'm waiting for a response.
Yeah.
Help me understand this. So,
well, and I heard a story from a HR professional who said back in the 80s, as you talked about, when a lot of this started, about Procter & Gamble, that it was a privilege to be on the hiring team. And they selected people and they tracked them, and only people who were good at hiring had that privilege. And then when the applicant tracking system came about and technology came about, something shifted that said every hiring manager had the right to make hiring decisions. And it's a skill, and if you only do it once or twice a year, you may not be very good at it. And our system actually helps kind of move past that, right, and get to the point of we'll help do the selection on skills and fit. You worry about closing the deal and getting that candidate on board and making sure that they also understand what it's like to work for you.
I remember I had a guest on this show early on who said very succinctly, when you arrive for the interview, their first reaction is not great. I'm well prepared for this one. They go, who can I get to do this for me? I've got work to do.
And that's right. And this, again, if you choose to opt out, somebody else may look and go, what are you, crazy? Why didn't you take the time with this person?
That's right. So If an applicant is preparing for an interview created by HireVue, it sounds like the first thing that they need to do is rehearse being in front of a camera and developing a degree of comfort in front of a camera in order to prepare well. Number two is to start thinking in a concise manner, 2 to 3 minutes, about role, responsibilities, accomplishments, if you're in IT, the technology utilized, money saved, money earned, and how you went about doing stuff. And start to formulate answers to what might be pretty predictable questions. I don't presume that your clients use standard questions in these things. And there's a point where they might go into some detail about your skills and successes that you need to have stories for to be able to communicate effectively in 2 to 3 minutes about some of your successes. Are there other things that a job hunter could do to prepare for the HireVue video interview?
Yeah, I would also recommend you have good notes around those stories, right? And some have your data and your facts at hand. You don't get that benefit in a live interview. You may say, hey, let me look at my resume, but you do have the ability to have your content right there. So have it in front of you. You get the opportunity to kind of glance down and have it reinforced. That's another thing that I would recommend doing. And there are multiple types of questions that also can be in these, so it's not all video based. You might be asked to write an essay. You mentioned, for IT and engineers, we have coding challenges, and so you can be asked to write a piece of code, and then oftentimes what they'll do is they'll follow that up with a question that says, you had 2 or 3 choices of how you could have written that code. Why did you choose the one that you did? And in there, they're trying to get at your thinking and your strategy. So also be prepared to know that you might have to do some of those types of responses as well.
It doesn't sound like your mother's interview. It sounds like a much more probing interview to allow a firm to do early screening beyond the resume. Am I hearing that correctly?
Oh, yeah, and you started out with your story about the video resume on VHS. Right when we started, video resumes were something that were about, they thought it was going to be a new industry, but no one has time to listen for 8 minutes to see if you say something that they want to hear. This specifically is asking you things that, the employer wants to know, can you do these in our workforce? And that's what makes it a much better process than just kind of go out and telling your stories random, willy-nilly that, people may or may not want to hear.
There was an associate working for a Wall Street firm. I won't mention his name because I don't want to raise that subject for him on Google yet again, but I think he destroyed the entire video resume business with his 8-minute video that included him doing ballroom dancing and karate.
I know the one you're talking about. You are right.
Destroyed an entire industry with one video.
He helped us out, but again, this is all about really hearing about what people have to say about the job. And I'll add the last point is we track Net Promoter Score and satisfaction, and we've had over 170,000 candidates. I know it's actually higher than that. That's my latest number. Respond. Across the board, our Net Promoter Score is in the 50s, which for anybody that doesn't know, that's extremely high. And satisfaction runs in the 90% with this whole process. So it's candidate friendly. Candidates love it. It respects them and their time, and that's really the ultimate value here.
Beautiful. Chip, thank you so much for making time today. How can people find out more about HireVue and its offerings?
They can go to our website, which is www.hirevue.com. And for candidates, we've got a whole page out there for you to go through and look at our tips and a little bit more in depth on technical things and other stuff you want to look at. Lots of resources out there for you.
So that's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, here are a few ways to connect with me. First of all, if you're interested in one-to-one coaching from me, email me at jeffaltman@thebiggamehunter.us. In the subject line, put the word coaching. This way I know what it's about. I can get back in touch with you. We'll figure out a time to speak for an introductory conversation so that I learn what your needs are and you can figure out if I'm the right person to help you. Generally, I work with people at a manager level and above, but I do make exceptions from time to time. If you're not at that level and want advice from me, the best way is through JobSearchCoachingHQ.com. There I have curated information that I've developed and others have as well that you can watch, listen to, or read that's going to help you find work more quickly. Again, you can ask me questions through the site. I'd be very happy to answer your questions. I look forward to helping you in either of those two ways. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request to me at linkedin.com/IN/the-big-game-hunter. Mention that you listen to the show because I love hearing from fans, from listeners who have been helped by the show. And like me on Facebook. The page is facebook.com/nobscoachingadvice.com, or look for Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter there. Give me 5 stars, a great review. It helps other people discover the show. And I'll be back tomorrow with more. In the meantime, have a great day. Take care.
Summertime calls for a big splash. A 220,000 square foot one to be exact. And that's just what you'll get at America's largest indoor water park. Hair-raising water slides and rides, world-class spas, kids' play areas, and diverse dining options to ensure that there's something for everyone at this unbeatable family getaway. Kalahari Resorts and Conventions in the Poconos. Book now at KalahariResorts.com.